Hi all, we're going to round off our coverage of the recent World Championship match by looking at the final game 11. There was no game 12 because Anand basically in effect won the title by drawing this game. There was no need for a game 12. So in this game Anand kicked off with e4. So he only needed a draw, yet he played sharply, and Kramnik didn't play a super solid black system, he actually played the Sicilian defence. So we're in for a pleasant surprise from a spectator point of view of quite a contrasting, sharp, tactical slugfest. So we have the open Sicilian, and after a6 we see bishop g5, and now Kramnik played e6. So he has the Scheveningen type pawn structure, and White now played f4, and now queen c7. So this is quite theoretical. And White voluntarily gives up the bishop pair now with bishop takes f6. After g takes f6, and then played f5. So he's sealing up Black's double pawns. However, if Black could use his bishop later, his dark square bishop, or try and exploit these dark squares, then maybe Black can drag out a small advantage and wrest the initiative away from White. And then did play quite aggressive. Kramnik did play quite aggressively now with queen c5, so potentially the queen has got access now to that e5 square, which is more useful here in this type of position because White hasn't got the dark squared bishop to harass it with. Also there's potential for Black to play things like bishop h6 and maybe further intensify the pressure on that knight on d4 with a subsequent knight c6. White played actually queen d3, and now Black did intensify the pressure on the knight on d4, and Anand simply retreated it to b3, so gaining a tempo on Black's queen, which now went to the e5 square, so safely parking it there for the meantime. Nothing can really attack it very easily. Anand now castled queenside, and now Kramnik took the pawn on f5, so perhaps a slightly controversial decision, and it's a very sharp position. If White can gain control of that d5 square with a nice knight there, then maybe White's going to have strong positional compensation. And then played simply queen e3, so a temporary pawn sacrifice, and maybe the queen's useful for coming into b6 later, but also now White can continue with things like knight d5, rook d5. It's quite a dangerous position for Black with the king still in the centre. Kramnik decided to play bishop g7, and after rook d5, so we see that the queen has made way for that rook d5 to be possible. Queen e7, now and then played queen g3. So posing the question, what should Black do about the bishop on g7? Should Black just simply castle kingside, or maybe play the bishop check? If castles, e takes f, I think this is possible without Black getting slaughtered. Rook e8, this is an interesting position. Rybka thinks it's a slight advantage for White. These double pawns and the imprisoned bishop on g7, well, at the moment, doesn't give a very good visual appeal for the Black position. So actually after queen g3, actually Kramnik played rook g8, forfeiting the ability to castle on the king side. And now we saw queen f4. So seemingly, the white queen has done its job in stopping Black castling king side. So now comes back. So seemingly loss of a tempo, but it was a useful loss. It did something. After f takes e4, White played down knight takes e4, and there's a lot of pressure on the d6 pawn. So Kramnik's prepared to give up the d6 pawn in order to liberate his bishop on g7 with f5. So that bishop is potentially tactically useful, eyeing that b2 pawn. And also the e-file pressure might mean that queen e1 check is going to be useful. Knight takes d6 check occurred, and after king f8, it's difficult to get at the black king, it seems. An obvious move which fails horribly, I believe, is knight takes f5. So if knight takes f5, bishop takes and white's had it here. For example, rook takes f5, queen e1 is mate, queen takes f5, queen e1 check is mate in 5, because rook d1, and now bishop h6 is lethal. So we see that white would have to do queen f4 to stave off mate. So basically, after this king f8, what does white do with the knight on d6? Well, he just took the bishop on c8. After rook takes c8, now king b1 was played, inviting seemingly dangerous check. So queen e1 check, but Anand just retreats his knight to c1. So that was one of the points of king b1, to allow this kind of elegant knight retreat. After knight e7, the rook's attacked, so either it's defended or white counterattacks. So white counterattacked with queen d2, and now the queens came off, maybe perhaps surprisingly, but maybe not so, because if the queen retreats, then rook d8 is mating. So it's almost white's forcing the queens off now. I'll just quickly show you that. Queen e6, rook d8 is mating. So basically this is why Kramnik, in a very difficult match situation, he has to exchange off queens now, and this does reduce his winning chances, I believe. And also, unfortunately, white has a slight advantage here, because this f5 pawn is just going to be a simple target on this semi-open f-file. After bishop h6, Anand quickly prepares the attack on the poor f pawn, and here after bishop e3, Kramnik, not really optimistic of his winning chances, offered a draw, which Anand was only glad to accept to become the official world champion, again winning this match. Let's have a look at this game in overview and summary. So it seemed the spectators were in for a treat with this sharp variation of the Sicilian defence. White giving up the bishop pair, sealing those double pawns, but black had some dark square counterplay. Taking on f5 gave Anand the opportunity, though, to now play this rook d5, evicting the queen from the fine central square. Queen g3 disrupted black from castling naturally, and at the cost of a pawn sack, which was now regained, a pawn was regained with knight takes d6. So white's only not even a pawn down here. 1, 2, 5 pawns against 5, and white's actually slightly better now, and forced off queens with this queen d2 because of the threat of rook d8 mating. And here, after this rook f2 bishop e3, a draw was agreed. So it was an interesting but a bit short, in my view, World Championship match. Perhaps the match should have been over a few more games, because it seems, once Kramnik was two points behind, it was a very depressing situation to be in, and the opponent could have just tried to draw every other game. But we had some interesting games, and Anand is a worthy world champion. If you would like to see the whole collection of this match, I'm doing a playlist, so look out for my playlist for this World Championship match. Thanks very much. Please leave any comments on YouTube.